Thank you. And we proceed this webinar with a brief overview on the motivation of agile scaling. I would then give you some ideas about different scaling techniques and frameworks. Will include also some experiences from case studies and provide you finally with some practical guidance. Now, the starting point is what we do on an annual basis in terms of what are the needs in different critical industries such as IT, automotive, transport, medical. And what we see from this year's survey, which we have done at the beginning of the year, is that the topic of safety security, that is quality requirements, is both a short-term and a mid-term challenge. At the same time, there is the natural efficiency and cost pressure, while all these innovative topics such as digital transformation, connectivity, etc., is somehow being covered by additional needs. But this together means that we are back to what we call the magic triangle, which is that we are in the midst of innovation, quality, and cost requirements, and that naturally is the starting point for any kind of agile development, because only with agile practices it's possible to manage this challenging situation. Now, the classic agile methods have been around for many years. In fact, if we go back historically, we see that many have been invented by the late 80s, early 90s. For instance, by companies like Microsoft. There was in the development of Microsoft Outlook a point in the early 90s where they realized with several hundred software engineers, classic waterfall-like practices would not anymore work. They invented continuous build, they invented smoke test, and all these agile practices, which later on, by the end of the 90s, were combined into the agile practices and the manifest. Now, these agile methods have initially been thought to be applied by co-located rather small teams to typically IT software projects. The evolution, however, with more recent projects and industry challenges means that we have several locations. We have ecosystem approaches, we have different big teams, and we often have not only one software development environment, but we have complex systems. We have often several engineering disciplines. We have embedded systems. We have ubiquitous systems. We have cloud technology, which interfaces with other techniques. In other words, the complexity has increased sharply since the times when the Agile Manifest had been written. What it means is shown here. We just summarized here a couple of quotes from a study which we have been doing in 2017, 2018, and it was published by IEEE Software, where we realized on the one side that the survey participants, which were several hundred worldwide, consider Agile as the highest ranking technology in terms of past and future impact, which was quite interesting to see because no other software technology had made it for the past and the future impact with the same high ranking. For instance, AI had been around for many decades. It is not seen as having had a past impact, it's seen as a future impact. Vice versa, techniques like object orientation are seen as past impact, but without much future impact. About 30% of the companies reach their agile ambitions, half typically fail. If we look into the setup, we see that about 1/4 of the companies really agile. Another quarter is what we call startups, which by definition are rather agile. Yet another quarter is more in a bureaucratic mode from which they are hard to really escape, and 25%, and that's a very big figure, is what we call trapped in change. That is, they try to break their previous development scheme but don't really proceed. We see a lot of demands for continuous delivery, for continuous compliance, for instance, because of cybersecurity topics which need rather fast updates. We see also that organization-wide agile culture clearly gives financial benefits, but at the same time we also realize that not always the agile models which are currently applied for scaling do really deliver the value which is expected by the users. So agile, in order to scale, must perform towards real industry needs, and that has the 4 dimensions of business, process, organization, and technology. What I mean with these 4 different dimensions is that obviously we have always the business dimension. Remember the magic triangle with the cost and efficiency and market pattern, which means that we have to focus on flexible delivery, on value, on supply chains, which can be flexibly adjusted. Process means that we need to have often compliance, governance in our processes. We need to be prepared for risk mitigation, and we have a high amount of interaction and dependencies across different business processes. In terms of organization, Agile is typically centered around empowered teams. The challenge is that we have increasingly distributed teams, which make team building much more challenging. We have collaboration, we have global value change, and on top of that we have ever-growing complexity in terms of technology. Most of our projects have legacy, and that makes it also more challenging than what traditionally has been seen as the application domain of Agile. So the Agile drivers, which I can typically put in a wheel, which is to empower the teams to focus on value, to reduce waste, to optimize on value streams, and to continuously improve, have to target these 4 dimensions, and this is exactly the challenge of Agile scaling. So what I will show you here is not a closed framework, although I will compare the current frameworks like Save Less or the Scrum, but what I will rather advocate is a toolbox, because our experience is that too often in the current scaling projects, we see companies kind of trapped in a situation where they go from the one complex behavior driven by environments like CMMI and heavy process infrastructures into the next heavy process infrastructure called SAFe. And these kind of infrastructures are typically quite difficult to apply. Also, the intention behind is typically quite useful. I'm not going to say that a CMMI had not good intention, but in most cases it was applied the wrong way, and that made it a very heavy bureaucratic instrument. And that's the same what we see today with these closed method frameworks. And for that reason, we advocate rather a toolbox approach, which can be adjusted to the different dimensions which I showed before, such as to which degree do you have distributed teams, to which degree do you have legacy, what kind of compliance requirements do you have, what size of organization you have, what kind of variation do you have, what market demands there are in terms of cycle time, and according to these dimensions, it's then a bit more obvious which of the Agile tools can be applied, which Agile tools could not be applied. Let's have a look to that. An important driver point is that we see today a convergence of classic IT and classic embedded across different industries. That's unique, and that's really one of the major turning points which we face in industry, which is that we had for many years, decades, kind of 2 worlds of IT on the one side, embedded real-time applications such as automotive, transport, aircraft, etc. on the other side. Now increasingly both converge. IT converges into embedded with the